Stress-free and high-quality remodeling. View their stunning transformations online at the number 4 everremodeling.com.
Now, from the Signature Bank Studios, this is Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan Proft on AM 560. The Answer.
Top of the morning, Dan Proft here. Yesterday, President Trump commenting on the strikes authorized against the Iranians after that Apache helicopter was shot down by an Iranian drone, saying they're going to have to pay. I love the reporting this morning. Iran saying the ceasefire is effectively over. Oh, now it's over. The ceasefire, as defined by President Trump, as when the other side is only moderately firing weapons, firing missiles at American assets, American soldiers, and those of our allies.
Now, look, I've been working with Iran for a number of months, and they should sign their deal. It's a good deal. It doesn't give them the right to have a nuclear weapon. In fact, it totally prohibits them from ever having a nuclear weapon. And it was just tap, tap, tap. I don't know what they're doing. So they then shot at our helicopter. Very expensive helicopter, by the way, but much more importantly, the two men, fortunately, they're okay. But an amazing rescue. If you ever get a clip, you won't believe the rescue, how cool it was. The equipment we have. Look, we have the strongest military in the world. And I gave them a break at the request of Pakistan. The Field Marshal and the Prime Minister of Pakistan are great. We stopped them from going to war with India. You would have had a nuclear war.
Yeah, okay, and then he goes, trails off into his customary rap. He also said this about what's been happening during the blockade and the effective shutdown of the Strait, about the oil, and we've talked about this, but about the oil that has been clandestinely being removed and moved out, which is one of the reasons he argues that oil prices haven't spiked more than they have.
This war is over. I can say it now. Something you didn't know. We've been taking out millions of barrels of oil. Nobody knows it. You know who doesn't know about it? Iran, until right now.
Yeah, the Wall Street Journal reported on this like a week ago. We've talked about it with a couple of our experts over the course of the last handful of shows. So I'm not sure the Iranians were unaware of this, and I'm not sure that that's really either statement is really really explains the posture that the president has taken for the last 6 or 7 weeks, frankly. But for more on this, please be joined by Jonathan Schanzer. He is the executive director of the Foundation for the Defense of Democracies. Jonathan, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
My pleasure.
One of the descriptions of the retaliatory strikes against the Iranians, emphasis on proportional. Should they be proportional or should they be disproportional?
Well, my personal opinion is that we shouldn't be talking about whether they're proportional or not. We should just be doing the job that needs to get done in order to bring down the regime. Uh-huh. In other words, we know that they're aggressive. We know that they've just attacked a helicopter. Why does it need to be said whether our response is proportional or not? When we do that, what we're indicating is, well, we really want them to come back to the table. We hope that they talk to us. We hope that there's a deal. We look like we are bending over backwards to communicate to them and to communicate to the world, for that matter. What I think really we should be thinking about right now is, okay, we hammered their military. We've destroyed a lot of their capabilities. That's good. They're weaker. We've taken out a number of their top leaders. Also good. So they're weaker. They're reeling. Now we have this economic siege that we've put on the Persian Gulf. That means that they're unable to export their oil. They're losing probably tens, maybe hundreds of millions of dollars a day. Pretty soon, we hope they're going to have to cap their wells. They're not going to be able to produce oil. And then we're talking about billions of dollars in losses. And on top of that, we have the ability to keep hammering away at targets of our choosing whenever we want, without an explanation, without justification, because our goal is to get them to submit and to capitulate. That's what we're pushing for here. Nothing else really matters. And so I think the messaging has been, look, not wildly off, but off enough that, it has folks like you and me scratching our heads saying, why is the president saying these things when we know what the goal is? The goal is victory, and we don't need to explain every little step we take along the way.
Yeah, and also, I'm just, I'm puzzled by how this makes sense, the approach taken, if the end game is like we need to, massage our Gulf state allies because we need to be respectful of people that want to play intermediary, like the Qataris. We have a good relationship with them on some fronts. Very complicated relationship. The piece that you guys did, that report on the Qatar that the Foundation for Defensive Democracies did, was outstanding and troubling on so many levels. But I just don't understand that. So because ultimately we're going to turn this over to them. So if we're going to turn this over to them, whatever this is, do you want a weakened Iran, or do you want a fundamentally changed Iran such that it doesn't have the capacity to pose any of these threats, nuclear weapons or cutting off commercial shipping in the Strait?
Well, I think you raise a bunch of interesting questions, and I think each one important. First, let me just say the idea of leaving the region to the Qataris would be an absolute disaster of an outcome for the United States. You got to remember the Qataris are patrons of Hamas, the Taliban, Muslim Brotherhood, They shelter Al-Qaeda and ISIS. What we need is we actually need to hand this over to responsible actors in the region, probably more like the UAE. But I think there's a bigger question beyond that, which is, are we actually trying to get regime change? Are we trying to get fundamental change in the region? Or are we just trying to get them to the table for a deal that they probably won't honor? And I think that the president, look, I understand why the president doesn't want to say regime change. It's a dirty term here in Washington. Our experiences in Iraq and Afghanistan, they were disasters. We lost, trillions of dollars. We lost thousands of soldiers. It was an unmitigated disaster during the Bush administration, and I think we're still licking our wounds from that. And so the president, is he actually in reality thinking about regime change? Because if he is, well then again, that changes the way that we look at all of this. We should be looking to bring down the regime. We should not be talking about proportionality. And even if we are just thinking about an agreement, we should. They're going down.
But but even on how could you sign an agreement with them crippling commercial shipping through the Strait of Hormuz for the last month and a half? With that happening,
can't.
Right? So you signed a deal saying we open the Strait of Hormuz now. Well, that just says we can So and the Gulf states will some specific performance that indicates that they will abide the term. So if you can't trust it, you call these guys lunatics. If you can't trust them, and you can't trust them without Gulf state chaperones, and then why don't you just get the Strait open through force right now, and show them that the Strait will be open, and you can exist under a paradigm where the Strait is open and no tolls and no piracy and no nonsense, or you can stop existing.
Well, look, I think you have it exactly right. That is the choice that we should be putting them to, and they should fear the United States. They shouldn't be hearing about proportionality and ongoing efforts to engage in diplomacy. We should be forcing them to capitulate. That is what war is all about. It's about forcing your enemy to end their hostility. I think the subtext here that we all need to understand is, again, it tracks back to this regime change question. The president doesn't want to put thousands of troops on the ground, which may be necessary to open the Strait of Hormuz. He doesn't want to put naval vessels in harm's way. right? We don't want to see us get drawn into a quagmire, and that's exactly what the Iranians, I think, would like us to do, right? To get into an asymmetric war where we drop huge amounts of munitions that cost billions of dollars. You know, small attacks, fast boats, shoulder-fired missiles, and we find ourselves stuck again. And so what the president is trying to do is he's trying to kind of navigate this narrow lane that he's created for himself. It may be too clever by half. It may not be something that's feasible. And again, we just may need to go back to brute force here. But I do think that we are struggling to find exactly that, like trying to find that perfect lane to be able to operate.
But why would there need to be boots on the ground to reopen the strait? We couldn't do that strictly with our Navy and air support?
Going through, and we declare the strait open, and then all of a sudden there are a bunch of Iranian IRGC guys that are in the mountains that are, I don't know, quarter mile, half mile away, and they pop up out of nowhere with a shoulder-fired missile, and they shoot. And we can try to respond with, you know, let's say helicopters or aircraft, but that would require an enormous effort. My guess is that we'd probably also need boots on the ground in order to secure these areas. And I do think that that may be, and obviously I'm not in the head of the president, but that may be part of the challenge here. Again, where the president understands that winning is the right thing to do, but how you win and what you risk by going for that win, I think that's what's giving him pause, I think.
Back in this hemisphere, just want to get your reaction to the situation in Cuba, because this has been obviously subordinated to Iran, but it's been discussed, and there's some real jawboning and brinkmanship going on, particularly from Rubio at the direction of the Canel regime there in Havana. And, the idea, the feeling is that, this is a regime that's teetering and we're going to watch it fall, or we're going to try to facilitate its fall. And maybe there's some play for what comes next, some theory about what comes next. But, that's another regime that's been able to, survive, like Keith Richards over the last 70 years too. I mean, it's just every time you think they're going to be down for the count, they're not down for the count. And that can create, I mean, if that state does fail, you could create, and I'm sure this is something that Rubio and the president are considering, but you could create openings for drug cartels and other bad actors. You could create, a real wave of migration towards the southern coast of Florida. I mean, what do you get the sense of, or what should the posture towards Cuba be?
Well, I think right now the posture is, complete and total hostility. I think much in the same way that we viewed Venezuela. And I think there is kind of a Venezuela approach that lies in wait, right? We're not there yet because we've got a lot of our assets pinned down in the Middle East right now as we try to figure out this Strait of Hormuz crisis. But I think from everything we're hearing from the Trump administration, from the president, from Marco Rubio, we are likely to head there next. Now, we have heard that there may be some Cuban surprises waiting for us, that they might have military capabilities that we haven't yet seen. I'm not sure how much that is going to keep anybody up at night. I think we probably have overwhelming firepower to deploy there, but we need to be able to free ourselves up. I don't think we want to be fighting two fronts, just even in two different hemispheres. It sounds complicated. I think the president's trying to take care of business first in the Middle East and then move on over. But I think there, we already know that economically, the same kind of siege that we have on the Iranian regime right now, we have on Cuba, right? They're not getting the oil that they were once getting from Venezuela. They are in deep trouble economically. And that means that politically, they're in deep trouble. And we're just letting that stew, right? We're just keeping a lid on that pot, and it feels like it could explode. So I see, potentially good things just to soften them up for whenever that moment comes where the Trump administration decides, okay, it's go time. We've cleared the decks with the Islamic Republic and the Strait of Hormuz. Now it's time for the next. And I got to say that the assertion of American power in multiple hemispheres is, I think, a really good prelude to the great power competition that is looming or that is already underway between the Chinese and the United States, right?
Well,
You've got a Chinese government that wants to dominate the world, and we're saying not so fast.
Well, and the other thing, the development we've been discussing in Latin America and South America has been the run of conservative victories at the presidential level. And so now we have allies in those countries, at least this administration does, that we haven't necessarily had before. And and we can outsource maybe some of this Cuban business to our allies there. But regardless, we have more reliable heads of state than we've had in a long time.
No, that's absolutely right. And again, I think that's part of that same great power competition thing, right? If we're watching the sort of unraveling and declining of, let's just say, leftist, socialist, communist, pro-China, pro-Russia regimes in our neck of the woods, and you're starting to see the rise of, more reliable allies, as you say, this is good. This means that we are gaining control over our hemisphere and maybe even beginning to show that there's momentum further afield. I do think that a win in Iran will go a huge way. It will make it really look like the Middle East is ours as well. That obviously leaves open questions about Europe and what's going on with Ukraine and Russia and what do we want out of Europe. I think that's a big open question. We see more disdain than attempts to bring in stronger alliances in Europe for now. There's obviously questions about the countries that are immediately in the sphere of China. But again, there is a great game afoot here. And I think Americans are slowly waking up to this, that great power competition will be the thing that defines the next 50, 100 years. AI, by the way, as well. And that's an important element to this great power competition. You got new technology that both of these great powers are trying to wield. And there's this question of territory and how much each of us controls within these various spheres of influence.
Yeah, I mean, if we can topple the Islamists in Tehran and the communists in Havana, then maybe we can work on toppling the Islamists and the communists in big cities in America. Could try to do that.
I think it's a goal.
Yeah, that's a goal.
Yeah.
Jonathan Schanzer, Executive Director, Foundation for the Defense of Democracies. Jonathan, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Anytime.
And he joined us on the alphawealthgroup.com answer line.
It's news, opinion, insight. This is Chicago's Morning Answer on AM 560. The Answer.
Hey, it's Jeff from Jeff Buys Your House. When people call us, they're not just selling a house. They're usually dealing with something bigger, a major life change, a family transition, or an overwhelming situation. We recently helped a family in Aurora. Mom needed memory care, and her kids were trying to coordinate everything from out of town. The house was full of 40 years of belongings, and they were completely overwhelmed. They told us they didn't have the time or energy for repairs and a major cleanout. We bought the house as is and gave them the time they needed to take what mattered. Family photos, heirlooms, whatever they wanted. And we handled the rest. After closing, they sent us a note. You gave us time to grieve, not just sell a house. Since 2007, our veteran-led team has helped hundreds